For months now, since the release of the Episode 8 teaser trailer at Celebration, I've been speculating that the important books that we've now seen in both trailers for The Last Jedi includes the Journal of the Whills, and potentially other important works that have been introduced into the canon, such as the collected poems, prayers, and meditations on the Force. As part of the speculation, one would believe that these works had important connections to the ancient Force-worshipping religious organization, the Disciples of the Whills, and the Moon of Jedha, featured heavily in the film Rogue One, given that the Disciples share the Whills name with the journal, and the collected works on the Force was edited by a disciple of the Whills. In previous videos, with no concrete evidence suggesting that the books in the trailers are connected to the Disciples or Jedha, I've speculated that Luke Skywalker could have tracked down these works and would have been heavily influenced by them through his travels with Lor San Tekka in the search for Jedi lore after Return of the Jedi. However, with the recent release of the Star Wars comic number 38, The Ashes of Jedha Part 1, we don't have to speculate if Luke ever came to learn about the Disciples of the Whills and their teachings. We now have confirmation that Luke not only visited the Moon of Jedha on at least one occasion prior to Return of the Jedi, but also made contact with a disciple of the Whills. In this video expose, I will not only describe Luke's mission to Jedha and meeting with a disciple of the Whills, but also explain why this is potentially so important in regard to Episode 8. In the most recent issue of the Star Wars comic series, set in the aftermath of A New Hope, with Luke, Leia, and Han searching for a new rebel base, their search brought them to the Moon of Jedha. As described in the comic, Luke comes to the rescue of a disciple of the Whills, as well as a partisan, allowing them to escape the forces of the Empire, who've returned to the Moon to mine as much of the remaining Kyber crystals there as possible. Having escaped from the stormtroopers, the rebel leaders and the two individuals they saved land on the planet of Nod Jedha, the planet that the moon orbits. Safe upon Nod Jedha, Luke looks up upon the moon, recognizing it as the worst thing he's ever seen, something that feels so wrong. He's then joined by the man he helped rescue on Jedha, who agrees with Luke about the tragedy that took place upon the moon. Luke then asks if he's some kind of priest. In response, the man tells Luke that his name is Cholkol G and explains that he's an aspiring member of the Disciples of the Whills, hoping to one day join their order. Of course, that future was considered to be questionable, given that to officially join, he'd have to meditate within the Temple of the Kyber for a full month, and due to the Imperial's actions, the temple had been utterly destroyed. And with that, we see Luke had a clear connection with the Moon of Jedha and an introduction to the Force-based religious order, the Disciples of the Whills. This is important as it provides concrete evidence that Luke would become aware of the teachings of the Disciples after Return of the Jedi, and influenced by them in the lead-up to the events of Episode 8. Importantly, either through Cholko or by searching out the lore and works of the Disciples himself, Luke could easily learn the teachings found within the Journal of the Whills or a book like the collected poems, prayers, and meditations on the Force. The crucial aspect of this is that we've seen these works promote a conceptualization of the Force that focuses on its totality, not merely its singular components of light or dark. As we saw through the beliefs of Chirrut, although a guardian rather than a disciple of the Whills, he sought to encompass the totality of the Force, distancing himself from the Jedi philosophy of recognizing the discord between lightness and darkness. As was seen in the Guardians of the Whills novel by Greg Rucka, Chirrut, as a guardian of the Whills, believes that for the light to exist, there must be dark. For the Force, there must be balance, clearly demonstrating the necessity of both the light and dark sides. The Moon of Jedha was filled with understandings regarding the Force that were similar. As the Rogue One visual guide makes clear, the Jedi Order may have been the most well-known practitioner of the Force, but the Moon of Jedha was home to other schools of study and understanding that separated themselves from the Jedi, from the Firmists to the Weldsingers of Grace, to the Central Isopter to the Brotherhood of the Beatific Countenance. The fact that we know that Luke now has a connection to the moon in the canon, as well as an introduction to the religious aspects of Jedha, There's now evidence for why Luke will ultimately start to move away from the dogma of the Jedi and start to embrace a balanced approach to the Force, recognizing the necessity of both lightness and darkness. We potentially see a specific reason now for why Luke appears to tell Rey in the teaser trailer that the balance between the light and dark is so much bigger than each component on its own.
What do you say? Light. Darkness. A balance. It's so much bigger.
But no example is more important in my opinion than the disciples of the Whills. If the works from the trailers does include the Journal of the Whills and the collected poems, prayers, and meditations on the Force, which given Luke's mission to Jedha, I believe is very likely at this point, particularly knowing that the Temple of the Kyber was stripped of its artifacts when the Empire came to Jedha, as explained in the Guardians of the Whills novel, and thus could have easily avoided destruction from the Death Star's super laser, Luke will have been heavily influenced by the concept of balance in the Force, and a reliance upon both the light and dark sides. Whether it be the Journal of the Whills' reference to a need to refine one's sight to a gray or balanced approach, or references to the primacy of the Force in its totality over light or dark on its own, found within numerous works comprising the collection edited by the disciples of the Whills, Luke would certainly learn from them why the balance between lightness and darkness would be larger. With the Ashes of Jedha Part 1, we now have a specific and clear route for which Luke could ultimately come into contact with the Journal of the Whills and other similar works, as we've seen Luke become aware of both Jedha and the disciples of the Whills. So there we have it, why Luke's mission to Jedha and introduction to a disciple of the Whills could be crucial to Luke's formulation of a new approach to the Force that separates from Jedi philosophy. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions? Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. Or perhaps follow us on Twitter at SW Reading Club for updates regarding the channel. Or support the channel on Patreon for access to exclusive hangouts and book discussions. If not for me... for the worst thing I've ever seen.